Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the attendees from around the world, and a warm welcome to our speakers for this Daring Cities 2022 session. My name is Porya Salehi. I'm the acting head of urban research team at ICLEI World Secretariat and coordinator of ICLEI's global research strategy across ICLEI offices. I have the pleasure of moderating this session today. This year, we have the honor of kicking off the Daring Cities 2022 week, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the Daring Cities session titled An Expanded Climate Innovation Agenda for Cities, Tapping into the Fourth Industrial Revolution to Tackle the Climate Emergency. So before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you can know how to participate in today's event. As you can see, you've been automatically muted. However, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions to today's presenters by typing them into the Q&A box of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. So we will collect all these questions and address them during the panel discussion and Q&A part at the end of the session. You can also upvote other participants' questions by clicking on the like button to indicate you're also interested in having that question asked. This function will help us to address the most voted questions first. We would also like to inform you that this webinar is being recorded and the recording file will be shared on the Daring Cities website shortly. This is to ensure that interested experts in different time zones or those with conflicting commitments could also benefit from the insights and discussions in this panel after the event. So we have a very exciting session for you all now, and I cannot wait to get into this topic with our esteemed speaker. The topic of today's session, as discussed, is around this expanded climate innovation agenda. But this is not something that we just started today. This links to the conversations that all the partners on the panel have been working on that for years, and in this very 2022, this year, we had a session around innovation at ICLEI's World Congress, the research and the research symposium, which was the research and innovation component of World Congress. Later, we had a session around this at the Climate Academy 2022. And then just last week, we had another session linked to this conversation at the Digital with Purpose Summit. So you see that like this messaging and this conversation is ongoing between different partners, and we are trying to make sure that all relevant stakeholders and experts have their say into that, and this is actually a co-creation process for us. So in this session, we are looking to further understand how technology and innovation can be better leveraged to enable climate action that is driven by human needs. There are many aspects to this broader aim that we will aim to unpack through this session using the extensive experience and expertise of our invited speakers. We'll be looking at how cities are currently embracing or grappling with innovation, climate action, and human needs, and the governance structures required to enable it. So we will be looking at how solutions and strengths could be better exported and shared between cities worldwide to scale up the action that we need today. And more broadly, we will be exploring how technology can be put at the service of the environment and human needs to achieve and hopefully surpass the objectives of internationally agreed treaties and agreements and goals, including Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals. So in this session, I invite the speakers to reclaim the term innovation for climate action and for meeting human needs. Too often, we have conversations where everybody agrees and provocation is avoided. But today, I'm inviting all of our speakers to be provocative in good spirits. Let's ideate and debate, because this is the only way to arrive at novel solutions that could actually work and change the status quo and hopefully having real world extended impact. So before introducing our speakers, I would like to first acknowledge the lack of gender balanced contribution to our session. This disparity is not lost on us. And here at ICLEI, we are well aware that such valuable insights in knowledge sharing remains a huge conversation which is why equity and gender equality are core elements in ICLEI's overall vision, mission, and values. More specifically, it's a cornerstone to one of our organization pathways concerning equitable and people-centered development, in which we advocate for inclusivity in our urban communities. It must also be addressed that while our panelists are experts within their own right, there was no ill intention of the panel being male-oriented only by pure coincidence. We had also, as one of the speakers, we're hoping to have the lady mayor of City of Hobart in Australia, and despite the election period going on there, they were interested, but unfortunately, due to an urgent commitment with the council, they couldn't show up. That's being said, I think I speak for the whole panel when I say that the value, we all value gender balanced knowledge exchange, and that will have a part to play in bridging this gap in order to stimulate more inclusive, fruitful discussions. With that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce our wonderful panelists from UN agencies, international organizations, academy and research hubs, as well as local governments, to share their insights with us on an expanded climate innovation agenda. Our list of speakers includes Lady Mayor of Lusaka, Lady Chatangala, Lord Mayor Mohammed Rakib, the Mayor of Kalmunai City from Sri Lanka, Dennis Pamelin, Executive Director of Mission Innovation's Net Zero Compatible Innovation Initiative, Masamba Thoe, Project Executive at the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub, Professor Marcus Foss, Professor of Urban Informatics and Director of More Than Human Futures Research Group at Queensland University of Technology. We have Dr. Irina Anastasio, the Senior Software Engineering from Stadtwerke München, from the city of Munich. And we have our wonderful Miro Polzer, Executive Director of International Association for Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges. So as you can see, we have a wonderful and diverse panel today with different perspectives that will enable us to have an insightful discussion. Without any further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dennis Pamelin, to kick things off by introducing us to the topic and sharing some of the inspiring initiatives that Mission Innovation and RISE and their partners have been working on toward developing an expanded climate innovation agenda. Dennis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Perya, and thank you much for this introduction to a very important issue that I think is sometimes overlooked in the climate community. As Perya was saying, that sometimes we might convene too much to find consensus and not really stretch ourselves and asking some difficult questions also in terms of priorities and how we have done so far. Because the truth is, of course, that while some progress has been made, we are far behind in what's actually needed. So I'd like to share some slides and tell a story about the expanded innovation agenda and how we came about that. So hopefully you should see the slide deck now. So really, taking a step back, we really need to understand that what the whole thing is about is not really a climate agenda. It's a human development agenda. We need to restructure economy. And at the center of this is not really carbon, but humans. How can we provide humans with flourishing lives in a way when we dramatically reduce carbon emissions? But not just carbon emissions, of course. We need to make sure that there's enough resources for everyone on the planet. We can't create zero carbon emission solutions if not everyone can use them. If so, we assume that the large part of the global community will continue to live in poverty. And that is, of course, not acceptable. So what is this then? We in Mission Innovation, we were created at the Paris meeting because we saw that for decades, we've only had a problem approach, which made sense after Kyoto. Those of you who might remember, that was sort of the first breakthrough in 1997, where the rich countries agreed to reduce their emissions by about 5%. So we still have a system in place for incremental reductions in existing systems, focusing on the north. So we keep on asking cities, countries, companies, how are you reducing your emissions? Of course, an important question. But for the future, an even more important question is, what are your solutions for the future? How are you helping moving the agenda forward? How are you delivering what is needed? Because the world is changing. And the theme of today is, of course, we are living through an industrial revolution. There are fundamentally new ways that we can provide things to, both in good ways and in bad ways. And I'd like us to take a step back, because so often I would argue that this climate challenge is not a matter of economy, technology, or any other sort of tech single issue. It's about our mental images. What do we see as possible? Who do we see as responsible? And too often we forget to ask that question, because we ask, what is the price? What is the solution that's going to be on the table? Instead of asking more fundamental questions, what is it that we're up to? And as you probably know, it's this concept about an Overton window. Every stakeholder, every individual has their own idea on what is too radical and too conservative. And usually we find ourselves in the middle. But those windows are now rapidly changing. When the climate issue discussed in the beginning of the 90s, the idea was that coal would be with us for at least 200 years. Geoengineering and carbon capture was basically the main solutions. Over the time, we've seen how the way of what is possible, solar, sharing, new lifestyles have emerged. We have to also remember that when the climate issue was born and the structures we have now with reporting and commitments to reductions, internet did not even exist as a phenomenon. 1992, when the Climate Convention was created, UNFCCC was created, etc., internet was launched the year after. Sometimes we forget those kind of time perspectives, but we're looking at an equal time frame in the future. But most people today are still considering just looking at what we have today and reducing emissions from those. And I would argue there are two major things that we tend to forget. And the first one is what I mentioned, was that it's really the richest 10% that emits the basic chunk of emissions. So if we only try to reduce emissions, what we're trying to do is make fossil-free versions of how the rich people live today. But I sometimes say that we should not talk about reducing emissions. We should talk about avoiding emissions, because lifting people out of poverty, living flourishing lives, that is the big challenge. It's not to get the West to have fossil-free versions of an unequal society, is to create a world where everyone can live flourishing lives. So that's the 90s perspective on reducing emissions from current sources, to the 2020s perspective of making sure that 11 billion people can live flourishing lives. The second part is that we are still in this mindset of fossil-free typewriters. We're looking at what we have today, and we try to make a less bad version of that. But we're living in this industrial revolution. A couple of years ago, of course, a better car, maybe electrification of cars, was the option. Today, digital twins allows us to plan for green spaces so people can walk. We have 3D printers, we have drones, we have all sorts of electric vehicles around us. So now we need to ask, how do we get access to nutrition, to exercise, to culture, instead of saying, how do we make the car better? So we need to ask more fundamental questions, and that's where the focus on human needs comes in. That we need to remove the focus on the big emitters and ask, how do we get better lives for people? Because green steel might be a good idea, but if green steel is used to build oil platforms, it doesn't really matter. We need to ask, where is steel needed in society? So instead of just having these sectors continue to do what they do within fossil-free versions. And that is what we then call this expanded climate innovation agenda. We need to keep on looking at reducing emissions from current systems, and we need to target those with big emissions. But we also need everywhere to ask the question, what are the human needs that needs to be delivered on, and who can deliver on that? So this is not instead of having reduction commitments, etc. It's in addition to, and that is the big thing that we need to move up into now. And you can just look at that IPCCs, when they did the different scenarios, They did a sort of a static problem approach when they just look at how do we reduce emissions. And then we need a lot of CCS. We need a lot of bioenergy, and people will stay in poverty. This is basically what we call the fossil-free typewriter scenario. Or we can start with human needs and deliver resource-efficient solutions. And it's not just about then reducing emissions, it's about providing 11 billion people with flourishing lives. So what are the human needs and how do we deliver on those? Those are two fundamentally different approaches, but still most countries, cities, and companies only have reduction targets. They don't have solution targets. How do you move people out of poverty, and how do you also export sustainable solutions, which links this transition to something positive, to employment, to building new industries? So that's also where Masamba, we're going to talk about the expanded innovation agenda and the UNFCCC's Global Innovation Hub, which is one example of where we've seen some really exciting things happening. We also see it within the business community, even more in the business community, because we see now companies like Tesla reporting avoided emissions and saying, how do we give the world what is needed? Not just talking about how we reduce our emissions. And new business models are being put forward, and startup communities are really exploding with smart solutions. But we also see that within cities, the incubator community, those who are pushing the next generation of startups and young entrepreneurs, they are saying, here we are building tomorrow. But very often, cities' climate strategies don't include startups and next generation. And again, think back 30 years. Google didn't exist, Amazon did not exist, Netflix did not exist, Spotify did not exist, Tesla did not exist. So many of the companies that today are at the forefront of delivering cool solutions and smart solutions did not even exist. So we are very much stuck in yesterday's thinking, and especially the global south, where so many passionate entrepreneurs now are working on a very resource-constrained environment and delivering smart solutions. And that takes me to my last message about cities. We now see, and that's why I'm so happy about this session, that more and more cities are now starting to add this expanded innovation agenda, asking, how do we lift people out of poverty and allow them to live flourishing lives? And how do we start exporting solutions? How do we measure our global impact from the global south? We want to be part of the global economy. We want to give solutions to the rest of the world. And many of the solutions developed in the global north are not possible to use in the global south because they're too expensive. They require too many other kind of resources. So the global south is where we need to look for the global sustainable solutions. But so far, that has not been how the international discussions been about. It's only been about providing resources for tech transfer from north to south, or for adaptation. Both important, but we also need to add global south as an exporter of solutions, because in the next couple of decades, 80% of the world population will live in the global south. So if they are not part of the solution agenda, we are in for a very difficult time. So that's also a very hopeful message. And I just like to then say that there are also tools now that we're developing with ICLEI and others to see how can we start to map what is already happening. Because there are solution leadership in the global south, and there is also human need leadership, especially if we look at the current strategies. The global south is leading when it comes to acknowledging the need for humans to be developed, while the global north is still looking at their infrastructure and saying, how do we just reduce our emissions from that? So with that, I'd just like to end and saying that we really hope to work together with every one of you on developing this agenda, and just want to end by stressing that everyone today in the global south is already today a solution provider, as Priya said. There's already good examples of that, but so far it's not often been included in the general climate strategies. But of course, there are strategies for incubators for export. We just hope that we can allow them to play a bigger role and be included in the international climate discussions, because the global south and the global north need to collaborate around an expanded climate innovation agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for this very inspiring keynote speech. I guess we have now more than 80 participants in the room, and I'm sure they all enjoyed as much as I did. And thanks for that also to kicking off this a conversation for this expanded climate innovation agenda. I think that your point of asking more fundamental questions to unlock innovation that breaks away from business as usual is really crucial. And I really look forward to unpack this further in the session with other speakers, especially how to create a climate action strategy that doesn't reinforce the flaws of existing systems, such as inequality, but leads to flourishing lives for the global population is something that we really need to address that in this session. So I would like to take this opportunity to basically begin the interventions with our esteemed city leaders and pose a question to Lord Mayor Chitangala of Lusaka. So we believe as ICLEI, as the leading global network of cities, involving cities and local governments from the beginning of establishing an agenda for cities, in this particular case, an expanded climate innovation agenda is essential for its success and for it to address human needs. So we are so happy and honored that Lord Mayor, you were able to join us today. So I would like to know from your perspective as a mayor, and based on what you heard from Dennis about the need for an expanded innovation agenda, please let us know what resonates with you. Where are current tools and approaches to innovation and climate action lacking? And what would you like to see more in the future from your perspective as the mayor of Lusaka? The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to just say that Lusaka is in the southern part of Africa, for those my colleagues that are not aware, but also that we live in a city where we have like over 3 million people, a lot of urbanization happening. So for me, I think for the tools that we've been using, obviously we've been doing a lot of sensitization, and then we also have learning labs that there's a lot of research with the university, one of our biggest universities in Lusaka. So for that, at least we get information, and that information, that's the information that we use to just do the sensitization and also know exactly what is happening on the ground. And on the lacking part is because we don't have hello?
We can hear
Hello?
you, Bill.
Okay. On the lacking part, it's because we don't have the warning system at community level, and that's for preparedness. And this is where the city is lacking. And in future, obviously, would like to build capacity at local level for early warning signs system. So for that, the city is lacking. We don't have that. And then for the tools, of course, the learning labs, and that helps us to collect information where we call different stakeholders to map up effects of climate change and also propose solutions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lord Mayor, for that insightful contribution. It's really interesting that you have formed a partnership with the local university through learning labs to better understand what is happening on the ground. Of course, I would like to sort of pose a very quick question and a quick, hopefully, answer that. How did you go about establishing this partnership? And could you perhaps give us some example of the project that bring together these different stakeholders?
Okay. Of course, when we started trying to come up with how do we fight climate change, we were very happy that our local university, which is the biggest university, came up and partnered with the local authority. And some of the programs that we started working with them is also like Keep Lusaka Clean campaign that makes people come on board, where we clean up the city, open up the drainages, and just make sure that we do a lot of sensitization on waste management. And also we have a program that we have called Junior Council. And this Junior Council is a replica of the main council, but then we have children. So we go into schools, they have these competitions and they win, and we come up with the program where we have a a replica. So we have a mayor, a deputy mayor, and all the 38 councillors for the 38 wards that are in the city. And these are the youths that go and work with us at ground level in the community. So we try by all means to use a bottom-up approach. That means we get information right from the community level of how we can help and work together to fight climate change. And it has worked so well because then we get good feedback and first-hand information of what the people need and what we really have to do to fight climate change. And apart from that, the mayor's office has what we call Plant a Tree with the Mayor. So we incorporate that where we sensitize the people and tell them how important it is to plant the trees and keep the trees and not cut down the trees. Yeah, it's been a challenge, but we try all that. And because we're working with the youth and the children in schools, hoping that they'll carry it forward, because of course we do believe nothing for them without them. So it has been working very well. A bit slow because there's a lot of work involved and we need a lot of funding, but we're trying to introduce all those programs. Yeah.
Awesome. This was really wonderful. And this is wonderful because there were a few key points in what you were sharing here, like this bottom-up approach and engaging with local community and youth to really map the human need, whatever the need is in a given jurisdiction, and then trying to address that collectively. I think that's basically the essence of this session, that like, we all are aware of this climate emergency, and we need to react and we need to respond to that. But at the same time, we need to put human needs in place, right? And at the center stage. And the human needs might be different in a given jurisdiction. So this context-specific characteristics needs to be taken into consideration. And the approaches such as the approach that you mentioned, or this practical ways, are extremely inspiring because they seem to really ground your actions in local human needs. We'll definitely get back to you, but now I would like to move to our second esteemed city leader on the panel, Lord Mayor Attorney Rakib of Kalmunai City in Sri Lanka. Lord Mayor, I guess like we all know that like your city is being hit with a lot of severe impacts of climate change, tsunami, flooding, and so on and so forth in the recent years. So with that in mind, and based on what you heard from the keynote to speak, I want to say that there is a general consensus that we need to shift from reactive approach in responding to these challenges to a more proactive approach to climate action. So what do you think are the enabling factors for proactive innovation for a local government? So basically, based on what you heard, to which direction do you think an expanded climate innovation agenda should go to enable a local government to take a more proactive approach? The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much for calling me. As far as Kalmunai city is concerned, is a coastal, as you mentioned, we have a high density of the people, more than 150,000 living in the city. We have a long history, not only that, it is highly vulnerable to climate extreme events like tsunami, cyclone, flooding, and like that. The climate innovation is a must for us to tackle the climate emergency in Kalmunai city. We are focusing on both creating the knowledge and the capacity of key departments. Now, the local area is concerned. Now, the people participation is very important to prevent and fight against the climate change in our city. Now, in the city level, if we consider preventing the climate changes, make awareness among the people, that will help, as mentioned that Professor, in the future to make the people the people making the people understanding about the climate changes and the innovative actions. There are, I think, a main challenge will be to shift from the climate focus, current focus on sectors and structures, to a focus on human needs. This is something that is embedded in our city. Now, our people is concerned, they have a long experiences. They affected by tsunami. Now they have come to the normal position now. Even though we have an bitter experiences, now we have in the local level, we have with the participation of the people. Now we have taken some measures to control fighting against the climate changes, I think. Hello, you are hearing me?
We are hearing you very well.
Yeah, that we are focusing on both the creating the knowledge and the capacity of key departments, local. Now we have interconnections with the university, Southeastern University, which is the university. In the meantime, the Eastern University. We have 2 universities in our areas. They have already making the action plans to control these kind of situations in our area. But as far as Sri Lankan economical situations, we're challenging our steps to fight against these the calamities. But we have programs, and little by little we are making every arrangements to control these kind of calamities in our areas. We have to face it. Otherwise, we can't escape from these calamities. We can't escape from the calamities. We have to face it. So what are the needs to be done to control, or the precautions to be taken to control these other things? Now, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, there is something else. Our economical situation goes very, very down. In the meantime, we are expecting the new future, the next future, how we are going to tackle this. So we need the world support to knowledge-wise, in the capacity-wise, we have to take all the action. Now we are community-wise, we have together, we made that understanding to the people. We have propagated all the peoples. We media-wise, in the meantime, we are taking the surveys from the people. How we can control from the future calamities. So with the participation of the collaboration of the universities, we are just taking this action to control and then control the calamity. We can't control the calamities, but survival of the facing the calamities. We are taking the steps now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lord Mayor. I guess like all the points that you were sharing was music to my ears. You mentioned that climate innovation is a must for you due to the challenges that you face as a coastal city with high population density. And then it was very interesting that you mapped a very fine challenge, that the current planning is based on sectoral approach while it needs to be based on human needs. I guess this is indeed a call for a more dynamic approach that ICLEI is also like supporting this, as the current problem-oriented static approaches are looking to respond, based on the existing systems. While this needs to be changed. And I especially enjoyed the conversation that you started regarding how to communicate with local citizens to enable them to be part of an innovative and long-term approach to addressing climate issue. It's interesting, your point on how you manage to coordinate the research agenda. Of course, it's extremely important, of the local university with the pressing local environmental issues, and to ensure that the increased knowledge of the problems that you face can inform projects in academia, and hopefully the results of those projects will feed back into policy making processes to address these urgent issues at your jurisdiction. It's very inspiring. We're gonna get back to you. And now I would love to move to our next esteemed speaker, my colleague Masamba Thoe, who is a project executive at the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub. I had the privilege of joining Masamba on a panel at the Digital with Purpose Summit last week. And I'm very excited to get your input, Masamba, on this topic based on the inspiring work at the Global Innovation Hub around putting human needs at the center of innovation and then, of course, like changing value chains. Masamba, the question that I would like to pose to you is, given the work that you have been leading, what areas do you think are the core human needs at the moment that we need to focus on as a starters? And how do we move from incremental and sector-based innovation towards transformative and human needs-based models? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Poria. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to participate to this very important dialogue. And thank you, Denise, for setting the scene, and thank you, Lord Mayor, for contextualizing this very important topic. So if we want to have an impactful type of climate action, we need to prioritize the core human needs that are the most contributing to the GHG emission. So currently, the core human need of nutrition and health, the core human need of shelter, and the core human need of access, including mobility, because mobility is just a means. The core human need behind mobility is access. If you take these three core human needs, they account for 80% of the total CO2 GHG emission. So action on these three core human needs is extremely important. But before, what is really important is to understand what is the demand for climate and sustainability solution. And we can only understand the demand for climate and sustainability solution if we understand what are the needs of the population and under what constraint this need will need to be satisfied. The challenge is we have to satisfy the core human need of 10 billion people by 2050, and we have to do it in a way that is aligned with the climate and the sustainability goal. So to understand what is the gap and what is the demand for climate and sustainability solution, we need to be able to compare what are the capabilities of the different entities that are aiming at undertaking climate and sustainability action, be it at the national level, be it at the local level, or be it at the corporate level or as financial. So we need to understand what is the difference between what they perceive as possible and what they need to do, because very often these two things are different. So what they perceive as possible is based on the financial solutions that are already available to them, the policy instruments that are already available to them, and what is needed is really what is aligned with the climate and sustainability goal. So the gap between these two is what needs to be translated into a demand for climate and sustainability solution. So to formulate this demand in a way that is consistent with an expanded innovation agenda, the focus should not be only at the sectoral level. Yes, we need to have solutions at the sectoral level, but they will not be sufficient. They will be far from being sufficient. And the most transformative type of climate action are not those that will be identified at the sectoral level. So if you want to expand the space for innovation and access this more transformative type of climate action, we need to go back to the core human need and ask the question how innovation can be used for the development and upscale deployment of alternative value chain for the satisfaction of the core human need. The reality is that there are most of the current value chains that are used for the satisfaction of the core human need are not consistent with the climate and sustainability goals. So there is a need for alternative value chain to satisfy this core human need in a way that is more inclusive, in a way that is accessible to 10 billion people, and also in a way that is aligned with the climate and sustainability goal. So I just would like to provide one concrete example to illustrate what I'm saying. Generally, when you request a city to reduce its carbon footprint, the tendency is, the first reaction is to think sector level. So what will I do at the building level? What will I do at the transportation level, and so and so. And at the transport level, one of the, let's say, most widely identified and implemented type of climate action is to encourage the shift from combustion car to electric vehicle. This is needed, this is important, but this will be far from being enough. If we take expanded innovation agenda perspective, then we need to ask the question, why do we need car at the first place? Because moving from combustion car to electric vehicle is good, but having less car is much better. And if we say we are using car to address the need for mobility, then the next question is how innovation can help satisfy the need for mobility with less car. Then we can think about car sharing, and we can think about designing our city in a different manner, using innovation to redesign our city so that they are more compact, so that they are more complete, so that most of the product and services will be available at walking and biking distance. This will allow to satisfy the need of mobility with less car. And we can even go one step beyond and ask the question, why do we need mobility at the first place? We need mobility for access. We want to access municipality services. We want to access product from the supermarket. We want to access education. This is why we are driving our kids to school. We want to access our workplace. And then the question could be how digital technology can be further leveraged and scale up so that we can satisfy this core human need of access with less mobility. So the point I'm trying to make here is that with the expanded innovation agenda, you can actually access type of climate and sustainability action that otherwise you wouldn't be able to identify. And those type of climate and sustainability action are the most transformative one. And it will allow to have a holistic approach, because this is less about decarbonization as it was mentioned by Dennis, but this is more about how do we develop, how do we satisfy the core human need, but doing it in a way that is aligned with all the climate and sustainability goals, aligned with a 1.5 degree world, aligned with enhanced biodiversity, aligned with land regeneration, and aligned with planetary boundaries. Back to you.
Wonderful. Masamba, I'm so grateful for this very concrete narrative, coming from human needs, putting at the core, very tangible examples that you should really appreciate that. I especially think that your point of using human needs as a point of departure is essential to defining an expanded climate innovation agenda. I think that this resonates very well, as you mentioned, with a point earlier that Dennis mentioned in terms of using more fundamental questions to drive innovation that serves human needs. Also, the gap that you've drawn attention to between what is needed and what is possible is very important for this conversation, especially how addressing this the space in between these points by bridging across sectors is essential for a truly expanded and transformative form of climate innovation. I appreciate how you framed human needs as a common goal that could give us the opportunity to bridge across these sectoral silos and to address existing value chains to become more inclusive and accessible. And I think the example about transportation that you mentioned is very tangible for all of us. Like, instead of creating different modes of transportation, electric cars, of course we need those solutions, but in the first place, we are addressing the access, and do we really need to take a trip? Or like this example of e-governance, like in the past, many people, even in global north, needed to go to the city hall or many national and governmental organizations to do something. Nowadays, with just like one click or online, they do it. So you're actually reducing the number of trips while providing the access in different ways. And yes, as you mentioned, digitalization is handing us this opportunity to revisit the traditional ways of access in so I think this was really wonderful. And now this is a great opportunity for us to move to Professor Marcus Foth. Marcus is a professor of urban informatics. Urban informatics is a very interesting topic. And if you ask me anyone to talk about it, that's Marcus for me. So Marcus, you work across many topics, including people, place, technology, as well as basically something that you call more than human future. So how do you see these aspects of people, place, and technology and the nature-centric perspective of more than human futures, as you call it, being aligned and balanced in an expanded climate innovation agenda? And how do we put emerging technologies at the service of these issues? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Purya, and thank you so much for this question, as well as organizing this event, to the entire team and inviting me. I feel very honored. I'm very pleased to outline a couple of responses to this, but also I just first up think that perhaps it's time to maybe just be a little bit more controversial, because I want to challenge the notion of human need with there's a couple of slides, and that's how I'm going to try and explain our approach to the more than human futures in the work that we've been doing. And to just start off with, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where I'm based here in Meanjin, Brisbane, Australia, the Yagara and Turrbal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, to start off with, we started really urban informatics as this research group at QUT here in Brisbane around 2006, when a human-centered design approach and the focus on human needs was really, really important, because around that time we felt that the predominant notion in industry and government was technology-centric. It was technology first, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to make this work with people. Oftentimes the question was, well, here is an answer, but what kind of question is it really solving? So in urban informatics, we tried an approach that combines people, place, and technology. We bring together these three domains in an interdisciplinary approach. We've been starting quite early on, and now there is a mushrooming of interest with different research centers, some of them industry funded all across the world, that are focusing on notions of digital twins, smart cities, and a lot of them are trying to tackle the climate emergency. In our current work, we are focusing on more than human futures. I will focus on this in the next couple of slides, but we also have research programs around data care in smart cities. It's looking at privacy and governance. We have a program on digital inclusion, low-income families, as well as a focus on food and supply chains. And we're looking at how blockchain in agricultural technology can make a difference there. But coming back to the smart city notion and the idea of Industry 4.0 and these emerging innovation agendas, the smart city is obviously all about data being such a powerful tool when it gets analyzed. And we've heard already some of these examples by the previous commentators. So these data streams, they come together. There is interesting notions of control centers that are being developed all across the world. This one is an early on example from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil that IBM has created. But a lot of the time, what I feel is problematic with these approaches is that they are really very much focusing on a technology that is trying to solve these problems. The problem doesn't matter, but the technology will generate answers and solutions. And so the problem that I see here is that this very data-centric and very engineering-centric approach is leading to what we could call technological solutionism. So it is wrapped in a notion where the different problems, whether it's around climate change, whether it's traffic and congestion mobility, whether it is waste management, and the list goes on, that usually there is consultancy companies and IT companies that are providing technical solutions. Now, the problem around these technical solutions is that they are part of a design approach that is embedded in a capitalist framework. This commentator here in the design research world, Mike Montero, says the world was working exactly as designed, and it's not working very well, which means we need to do a better job of designing it. In our own work, we've been following this human-centered design approach for a long time, pretty much since we started. But we've recently come to the realization that the human-centeredness itself is a problem. The human-centeredness is actually what got us into the problem of climate change. The other word for climate change is anthropocentric greenhouse gas emissions. So it's the human activities embedded in an economic framework that are actually causing the problems we are trying to fight. So we got to rethink at the very core of this whether the human-centeredness is actually still a tenable approach to the governance of cities, to smart cities, and to the way that we tackle the climate emergency. What we are currently doing is a reframing that is informed by the environmental humanities. There's a number of theories, and this term more than human futures comes from the environmental humanities that is saying that rather than a human-centered approach, we want a life-centered approach that is based on planetary health and well-being at the core, rather than just human needs. The problem with human needs at the core is that in a capitalist framework, they often get just translated into convenience, comfort, and cheap prices. And so that then leads to a throwaway society with planned obsolescence. We want the cheapest iPhone, we want the cheapest devices, and we want them all to be updated at a very rapid pace, which leads to more waste and more pollution. So by moving away from this human-centeredness towards a life-centered approach, we're actually reframing the design methods that we're using. And I'll give you a couple of examples. It started with my colleague Laura Folano, who translated some of these environmental humanities theories into the world of design research. Her article here is called Decentering the Human in the Design of Collaborative Cities. We've then followed this up a little bit later, and we've published a study in the Journal of Urban Technology that is specifically targeting the issue of smart cities. In this piece here, towards a post-anthropocentric city, we are trying to reconceptualize the smart city to evade urban ecocide. And I'll give you two examples of what that could look like. A lot of the time we are talking about green buildings. This one here is the Bosco Verticale in Milan, in Italy, the vertical forest. And a lot of similar buildings that are all very green and very nice looking are being heralded as the solution to the sustainability crisis, not just in the global north, but increasingly in the global south as well. We are thinking that that is problematic, and the previous speaker alluded to this, because there is a clash between the kinds of building assessment frameworks that you see here on the left side and the actual expectations of the IPCC around net reductions absolute reductions on the right side. We're actually trying to move towards a net positive or nature positive approach. And the problem is really this: whilst the built environment and cities have always increased their efficiency, the absolute footprint is still going up. We're still increasing the carbon footprint despite these efficiency gains, and this is called the Jevons paradox. A second example here is the different kinds of technology installations. In this case here, you see a light installation in China that looks very nice for human needs. Humans think this is great. The insects, the natural world doesn't think it's so great. They're actually attracted by the light and they die in huge numbers as a result of light pollution. We've studied this and we've published this article around more than human media architecture that I'll share in the slides with you. So in our work, we are right now looking at new methods to embrace more than human participation for sustainable smart cities. And we've also been using non-human personas, which is a design method, in order to do this kind of work. So this is all encapsulated in a new research group that is trialing some of these methods at QUT. And we are collaborating with different researchers across the world on more than human design approaches that are putting human needs together with the planetary health and well-being and the needs of nature. This is our website there, research.qut.edu.au/more-than-human. You can find out more about our work. And I hope that these couple of slides illustrate the kind of approach that we are taking here in order to not just focus on human needs, but on planetary needs and the planetary health and well-being as well. Thank you so much, Priya.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Thank you for not only being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us, but also bringing a new perspective or shedding light on a new angle into this conversation. I really appreciate this perspective of more than human features and avoiding technocentrism that you have brought to the conversation. Also very interesting to hear how your perspective and research focus has evolved since the original founding of the Urban Informatics Research Group back in 2006. And thank you for elaborating upon this critical perspective of the idea of smart cities and the dangers of technological solutionism. You know, definitely an expanded climate innovation agenda should not be driven only by technical solutions built within existing systems. So in light of this, I guess I enjoyed a lot the example you shared regarding how the capitalist interpretation of human needs is shaping what we currently frame as innovation. This is really an important point. And it's very thought-provoking, your point of whether a human-centered approach can actually address the existing issues and how we can reframe these approaches for a more decentralized and holistic approach. I'm sure my colleague Dennis will have some points to bring and really try to figure out what would be the best way forward. But now I cannot wait to move to our next speaker, Dr. Arina Anastasiou, who is a senior software engineer at Stadtwerke München. So prior to this, Arina's work as a project coordinator for Logan City Council in Australia, applying the well-known co-creation model City Studio. So Arina, it would be great to draw upon these diverse perspectives, both of the systemic and co-creative, as well as technical sides of innovation, in your response to the question that what is the role of co-creation in innovation, and how does it allow us to break away from business as usual when combined with digitalization, for example? And then how can the public sector be innovative, knowing that you're working for public sector, and take risks to use new technologies and emerging technologies and achieve more collaboration with other stakeholders? Arina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Poya. It's really fantastic to be on this panel and discuss this really urgent topic of climate innovation and human needs and nature needs or planetary needs. As you can see from the introduction, actually, you said, oh, I was an innovation program coordinator, but also a software engineer. So I've actually worn many hats in the last years. And I think that diversity of experience is what gives me this really unique perspective and most insight when talking about innovation from a systemic perspective. So working in local government, working for a public utilities company, I've worked in startups, in consultancies, in corporations. I've done academic research on co-creation, where I was actually embedded in an activist community group as well as working with local government. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that I've gotten the opportunity to develop an understanding of the logic and the rationality that exists within these, I guess, ecosystems, and how this rationality really frames the thinking and the action with these different contexts. And so my vision or my understanding of systemic change has been shaped by that. When you are embedded in a certain context, something that to an outsider might seem completely irrational, completely absurd, completely illogical, makes entirely sense because you really understand where this thinking and acting comes from. So during the PhD, as I said, I was involved with an activist group as well as the local council. And I managed to really sympathize and empathize with each group and their challenges. But at the same time, these two groups actually had a very adversarial relationship to each other. But I could see both perspectives and recognize them as valid. And I think this opposition is where the biggest challenge for systemic innovation really sits. Not being able or willing to look at an issue from the vantage point of other actors. And as a result, one forecloses themselves from other perspectives, other solutions, deeming them either as irrelevant and missing out on that innovation capacity, or even worse, attempting to disqualify or invalidate these contributions and think of them as, radical or lunatic ideas. So perhaps to connect to the previous speakers, what Dennis might have looked at as a tendency towards consensus rather than engaging with things that are maybe a bit odd at the moment to us, but when we really engage with them, they start to make sense. And so this disconnect when we are trying to develop an expanded innovation agenda is really not desirable because as we've heard as well from previous speakers, technological innovation alone will not solve this wicked problem of the climate emergency. And so we need a combination of innovation across different sectors, but also integrated across different vertical scales and sizes of companies, levels of government, types of sizes of community organizations and NGOs. And this is, I think, where co-creation comes into place. I'm sure you've heard, prejudices such as community groups are full of eccentric people, government is incapable of innovating, academics are just disconnected from practice and just theorizing, startups just go around and break things without regard to consequences, and so on. And I can tell you from personal experience that the people who are in these spaces, they are deeply passionate, they deeply care about what they're doing. So my impression of them was quite different, but I am aware or became aware that they're bounded by context-specific constraints to which outsiders might be oblivious. So if we take your point around, governments becoming more innovative, I think there's certain challenges that we might not see from the outside. So, for instance, there might be a really litigious society kind of surrounding that government, which creates that risk aversion, or a particularly hostile media landscape, or funding cuts that actually make them unable to maneuver. And so or if you look at startups, right, some might have really high sustainability goals, but at the same time, they must place them second to the financial goals that are kind of imposed on them by the people financing them. And so sometimes the solution to addressing these problems is not always within that sector or with these people, but someone else outside of that sector might hold the key to actually make this transition much easier and much faster, right? And that's, I think, where the systemic component comes in. And so we cannot innovate and drive systemic innovation if we think that we are the only ones holding the key and the only ones who are doing the right thing, and everything that everyone else does, they're not capable of innovating, and what they're doing is irrelevant or absurd. This is where co-creation allows us to kind of break away from this unhelpful thinking, this siloed thinking. Well-crafted co-creation helps us kind of help us shift that Overton window, shift our understanding and empathy with the challenges the other sector is facing, to challenge assumptions of how we're doing things, shifting mental models, and reevaluate potential constraints, and potentially identifying ourselves as the ones able to address these constraints for another sector. And so what might have seemed really radical or eccentric or absurd until then, in our heads, it finally starts to make sense. And so after recognizing the validity of each other's perspective, we can move on to identifying a common goal, mutual leverage points, seeing each player's strengths and skills and resources, identifying existing or to be developed technology in support of these goals, and proceed to co-creation as a joint long-term action. And I think Lord Mayor Chitangala's example of partnering with universities and working with youth, I think, is a really great example of innovation beyond technology, and the willingness to learn from and about each other, while also allowing each partner to concentrate on the things they are really good at and valuing that. And so innovation in terms of social, economic, governance, and political aspects must be considered on an equal footing with technological innovation. This makes innovation everyone's business, not just something for techies or traditional companies. And I guess this presents a nice segue into my work at Stadtwerke München, which is Munich's municipal utility company, which is a 100% subsidiary of the city. So, the political direction that is set by the council is really, really relevant to us. And you might first think of, electricity provision and the maintenance of various like underground piping and renewable energy infrastructure, which we do, of course, but that's not the area that I'm involved in. We actually have a dedicated IT department servicing a number of subsidiary companies, including the MVG, which is the public authority of transport authority of the city of Munich, so as a sub-company of Stadtwerke München. And there I'm involved in designing and developing an integrated mobility app, combining public transport offerings, including digital ticketing with our own bike sharing program, as well as third-party micromobility services such as e-scooters and e-cars, or sharing cars, as opposed to us merely acting as an aggregator that redirects to other services. It's one place where you can actually book and pay everything across your journey. And we're currently working on developing multimodal capabilities with a long-term vision to offer real intermodal routing and trip management in one app, so you can combine riding your bicycle with taking a tram and doing the last mile with carpooling, for instance, in the long run. So this vision is driven by two things. The first is the City Council's mobility strategy for 2035, which, among others, aims to reduce the need for a car and therefore private car ownership, and instead provide diverse, safe, and convenient transport options from a single source. And on the other hand, it's driven by the understanding that any mobility offering must respond to people's needs. It must begin from where people are at in this very moment. So this means that rather, for instance, vilifying people who are still relying on private cars, there's a need to show them when eco-friendly alternatives would satisfy these needs, and allowing them to conveniently choose them over less sustainable options. And perhaps important to mention is that, against what might be commonly expected from a public company, we are doing all of this in-house, from the design, the user experience, research, to the software engineering, which allows us to build the required skills, knowledge, capacity, and of course, collaboration networks that are required for this kind of project. And as part of this, we've conducted a number of interviews with day-to-day users of mobility services. And among them was a woman who, her primary reason to participate was to convey that at times she felt judged for still relying on a private car, while the city was trying to, kind of say cars are bad and cars are evil. But she just needed this because she had multiple stop points every day in the city from work, to run errands, to support the children in their school and sporting activities. And it's well known that a legacy of the radial layout of transport systems that we have in cities is ill-suited for the multi-node trips that women take during a day, as opposed to a commute to and from work that would have been the typical use of transport for the men who planned these systems back in the day. And so we cannot remove something that is relied upon, in this instance the private car, without providing something else in a place that works. And so connecting back to what Masamba said, it's about providing access to the kind of mobility that people need and ask why do we need the car in the first place? Then work around that from the perspective of different sectors. And in our case, as a public transport authority, this is what we're contributing in enabling people to make a different choice. But at the end of the day, I think there's many factors that make innovation possible and scalable. And it's not only about having the technical capacity or the budget. It's also about the political will, which I think is really well illustrated by the 9 € ticket, which we had in Germany, where you could travel, across the country, across all kinds of public transport jurisdictions, each having like a maze. I think Germany is really famous for this, having a maze of different pricing models. And this, would have made any kind of technological innovation that tries to aggregate different tickets to have a journey from A to B, from South Germany to Northern Germany, would have made it obsolete as a policy intervention rather than a technological intervention. Even if the technological one would have been feasible, this policy intervention might take us there faster to our goal and further, because it might trigger a domino effect where structures and incentives within this system of jurisdictions, of pricing models, would actually lead to a deeper change. And so to conclude and kind of tie it back to the climate emergency, my current view is that much of the discussion around addressing climate change is still too narrowly focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions through technology-enabled efficiency gains or by engineering our way out of the crisis. We've heard from Lord Mayor Rakib, we cannot control the calamities. And so while we are making some progress overall in looking at things differently, we're still failing to, on a large scale, genuinely embrace alternative pathways of action as realistic and effective, rather than radical and absurd. So, for example, addressing our levels of consumption, our economic system, our ways of moving about, of governing and structuring organizations and societies, our relationship to growing and consuming foods, and in particular, relating to the natural environment, not as something to dominate and from which only to extract, but also something that needs replenishment and nurturing, to not only see nature as a secondary stakeholder in our systems, but realizing that we are not separate from it, through work such as Marcus's, for instance, that really kind of creates that awareness and helps us shift our mental model. And so at the end of the day, technology reflects our society and organizations, our worldviews, our mental models, our blind spots are in there, the structures and processes that are already in place. Anyone, being a technologist in a big software company or a corporation will realize that the system is organized in parts that directly reflect the organizational structure and who communicates with whom. And this is probably valid at the societal scales just as much. And so unless we seriously consider a wider variety of pathways and design technology together with or specifically in service of this particular shift, technology will merely reinforce what is already there, together with all its problems and flaws. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute.
Thank you so much, Arina. It was really interesting. Like you work on different levels with different partners, and then I could literally smell like the science from every sentence you were sharing here. A sharp scientist who's trying to feed every sentence with evidence out there from academic and practical sense. And of course, your point that we need innovation to bridge across sectors is not only technological focus in order to achieve transformative change. Well taken. And I'm interested to continue this conversation around how we foster and link co-creative processes to an expanded climate innovation agenda where we can address and challenge the constraints that currently exist. It was also very interesting to hear about your work with mobility in Munich, city of Munich, and how it resonates with what Musamba shared earlier in his intervention regarding a process where you are combining a fundamental understanding of user needs with what is technologically feasible at the broader political strategy. And I'm sure this approach is something that we'll pick up on further in this session and in the continued conversation. Thanks a lot for that. Just a little bit tight on the time, so we would like to quickly move to our next speaker, a very well-versed in daring cities. This is the third year that I have the pleasure of introducing Miro Poulter, the Executive Director of International Associations for Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges. Miro, thanks so much for being with us. Really a pleasure. And I would like to ask you, what do you think is the role of digitalization in sharing innovative solutions in an expanded climate innovation agenda? What do you see as key elements of needed digital ecosystems to facilitate the exchange of tools and approaches and solutions between cities and regions worldwide? And what are the different forms of innovation and how can they better integrate to be mutually reinforcing? Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Purya. It's such a pleasure and honor to be in this group of bright minds thinking about how we can really use digital innovation for an innovation of the climate agenda. And my topic is with blockchain technology towards climate neutral cities and citizens. Part of the background is that I'm also with the Climate Chain Coalition, 350 organizations which look on how to use blockchain technology for enhanced multi-stakeholder climate action. And Masamba, who we heard before, has been one of the founding co-chairs of this group. And we are really quite confident that we have some of the solutions for bringing the world further in the fight against the climate crisis with blockchain technology. So in terms of a problem analysis, we really, climate change is a global challenge. We as humanity are facing this global challenge all together, but we don't function together. Our response is not really effective. We have market failures, governance failures, and failures of the individual to live up to what we think is right, but in the end, we are all leading non-sustainable lifestyles. And so it's now the question how we come from global goals to local action and impact. And here now the answer to the question that we have to have a systemic innovation, transformative change, which needs innovation on several levels. We need new thinking, cultural innovation, really a stronger understanding that there will be no UN system, no outside actor solving the problem for us, but it's the need for the individual and the cities to find individual pathways towards climate neutrality and low carbon economies, and to coordinate globally with social innovation, with public sector innovation, so that we have all the relevant players, all those who take decisions about resources, about the scarce carbon budget that we have, and relevant resources, that all these people are in our innovation system, where we have information about who is doing what kind of impact this is generating, and how can we connect these actions with incentive mechanisms. And digital innovation, especially these emerging technologies, blockchain technology, NFTs in combination with artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, Earth observation data, also citizen science, although it's not emerging tech, but this kind of new technologies enable us to have, with relatively low transaction costs, much better connection of relevant players in the innovation system. And as we have been with my organization quite active in the UNFCCC system, which is the leading global coordination mechanism for the world for climate action. And there, one element also of the problem analysis that I would like to add here is that we have to be aware that the UNFCCC process is just a coordination mechanism between national governments, and that there is not really a global coordination mechanism for non-party stakeholders, and that this is also a systemic need which needs to be put on the innovation agenda of the world. And here we have worked with ICLE also, and with the Austrian government, and with the climate change secretariat on developing the solutions for global public sector innovation in the UNFCCC process, the Action for Climate Empowerment Innovation Project, ACE-AT. And here the aspect which has been identified by very many players in the field of non-party stakeholders is a lack of resources for climate action. And here the answer that we put forward was, with blockchain technology, there can be organized innovative resource mobilization for climate action. We can motivate people to contribute resources, and also with the initiative Digital Art for Climate, we said you can also contribute your artwork. It's already a valuable contribution to the fight against the climate crisis, the local level, but globally relevant. And we will capture this with this new type of technology. We create digital assets with non-fungible tokens. These assets can be collected and traded. And with this kind of mechanism, we can mobilize resources for multi-stakeholder climate action, and especially youth climate action. We have an NFT marketplace, no possibility to go into details, but this part I would like to present as an important element of the solutions tools, innovation tools for cities that need to be developed together. And it's Global Challenges Action Registry. We have, as I said, in the global innovation system, there is a lack of coordination of non-state actors. There is the Global Climate Action Data Portal of the UNFCCC, but which only has information about cities, corporations, civil society organizations, investors, but no entry point for the individual. But in the end, it's the individual who is driving with his or her decisions, with its demand patterns, with the voting and everything else, all the higher levels of societal organization. And therefore we need to develop a mechanism in which we document who is doing what for the climate, what kind of resources are mobilized, what kind of actions are taken, what kind of outcomes are created, and make relational information between these entries, so that at the end, like in our Digital Art for Climate case, it can be said that the one who has contributed the artwork has enabled a certain impact. And this kind of information system needs to be global, and it needs to be also especially on the city level. The cities, in order to find pathways towards climate neutrality, need to create the necessary tools for the citizens that they can find their way to climate neutrality. And this needs to be based on shared global climate action reporting standards, climate action impact evaluation methodologies, and many more elements are needed for this global multi-stakeholder climate action innovation system. And here we are trying to work on this with our United Citizens organization, which we are setting up as a DAO structure. It will be formally incorporated in Switzerland. We have their experts who can help us get tax exempt status and some other needs covered. And another solution element, and then I will finish, is the Global Challenges Action ID for functioning coordination and incentivization innovation system. We need to uniquely identify all the relevant players. And here we have to develop a digital identity mechanism, framework, self-sovereign identity, so that people will be able to document what they are doing and managing the entries in the Global Challenges Action Registry and more. Yeah, and the individual climate action neutrality pursuits should be a digital badges collection game. And we are now also working with big brands who want to have their employees empowered to lead low carbon lifestyles and also inspired to take the necessary decisions in their private setting. And in the context of their scope 3 carbon footprint minimization efforts. And along the same logic, it's also relevant for cities. Cities, if they want to be climate neutral, they have to have a strong focus on the citizens' needs and possibilities. We have a pavilion at the forthcoming climate conference, the Digital Innovation Pavilion, Digital Art for Climate Pavilion, where we will showcase solutions, and we will also have some kind of interview series about the new operation system for the UNFCCC process and non-state actors so that they can function as an effective innovation system towards climate neutrality.
Great. Thank you so much, Miro. This point of how we translate global goals to local action is absolutely essential. And not only how we translate them, but also how we track and communicate progress.
Yeah.
I'm very happy that you have tied digitalization and blockchain technology, for example, to the example of enabling new multi-stakeholder models of local governance that promotes local climate action as an aspect that we at ICLEI also recognize and absolutely essential to achieving the overarching global goals and initiatives. I also enjoyed your point around using technology to also engage youth in climate action, very concrete examples. Thanks so much for that. And thank you to all of you speakers for your insightful and thought-provoking interventions. We know that they have been thought-provoking because we received many questions, mainly through the WOHA app or the events app, and I'm going to pose some of them to you. So on that front, 2 points. First, I would appreciate if all our speakers turn on their cameras. Second, a quick update to everyone. Our events team kindly agreed to give us a few more minutes to make sure that we really achieve what we want to do here. So before moving on to a quick sort of panel discussion to answer some of the questions of the audience that audience submitted, we have a quick interaction that we would like to run with all of you as participants. So on that front, we invite you to take part by connecting to the Slido that we have prepared. You're going to create a word cloud together by responding to a very clear and concrete question with only one word or a short phrase as answer. So my colleague will share the link in the chat so that you can also simply click on it and join this exercise. So the question is, in your experience and from your perspective, as a city official, as an academic, as a researcher, innovator, international expert, practitioners, you name it, what needs to be taken into consideration when co-creating an expanded climate innovation agenda for cities? Or in simple terms, what do you really think is essential that those who are creating this collectively need to really focus on? And or what an expanded climate innovation agenda should offer? And perhaps now we can take a look at the results together. Wonderful. So in terms of like the answers, I see like accessibility, human needs, course, energy efficiency, some key sectors, systems thinking, that's very interesting. And I think that resonates with what Arina brought to the table. Inclusivity, absolutely, that's what we were talking about, co-creation. Time, that's very interesting point. We need to really elaborate on that. Sense of ownership. I really love this one. Sense of ownership. If something is not co-created, the sense of ownership is not there. But if sense of ownership is there, and if we, all the stakeholders, believe that we co-own that agenda, more likely to implement it and more successful results would be expected. And then I see some sectoral points, nature-based solutions, social sustainability, vulnerable communities, marginalized one, definitely be taken into consideration, diversity, empowerment, partnerships. Partnership takes literally center stage here when we're talking about it. And this is wonderful. We're going to map this with my colleagues, and we will definitely use this to inform our ongoing work on this front. But this is really a very rich contribution from your side. So thank you so much for your active participation in this interaction. I think that this was a great exercise to get an overview and make use of diversity of expertise and backgrounds in the room. With more than 100 experts in the room. This is really brilliant. We will now move on to a brief panel discussion with our speakers, guided by the questions that you, as the audience, have been submitting throughout the session. So I'll quickly pose one question to each of our speakers, and I would highly appreciate it if you kindly keep your answer to 30 seconds top. So let's start with Dennis as our keynote speaker. Dennis, we need quick action in our towns, right? And this is a question posed by one of the participants. The present silo thinking is a big obstacle in many countries, as an example in Germany. So we think of mixed themes like community, economy, science, according to agile project management to accelerate the process and to react dynamically. Static approach versus dynamic approach. Could that, in your opinion, be a solution in other towns and in other regions? This was a question posed by Wolfgang Beckerich. So the floor is yours, Dennis.
Well, I think the key thing is to realize that our current structures are based on the old industrial system. We have Minister of Transportation, not Minister of Access to different needs, etc. I think what Arina was trying to discuss there in her approach is really interesting in terms of really starting with people's needs. But even then, and I'd like to continue this discussion with Arina also in terms of how we move beyond just transportation to access, to the deeper needs, as she was also highlighting, that we can't just take what is now for granted. We need to both to meet people where they are, but also look where we need to go. So I think it's two things. One is that we need sort of a human needs structures to be superimposed on the current structure so that people can contribute, building transportation under the access to needs. The second one is to have a positive vision of the future. I think this idea of 11 billion people living flourishing lives guiding us, because I come from Sweden. We talk about biofuel into our airplanes. That is not sustainable on a global plane. It might look on a sort of good on a reporting on climate reductions, but it's not a way that allow people in the global south to live flourishing lives. So I think there's two things. Get to try, and I would love the mayors that was here who were really progressive. If we can work with some of those to say, can we set up a shadow human needs structure, and then also really rally people around a positive vision for the future. This is not about reducing poverty. This is about allowing everyone on the planet to live flourishing lives. And I think especially in the global south, the youth needs to understand that the world is not accepting them just to move out of poverty. They want them to live flourishing lives on non-compromised level. So these two things, positive vision and human needs, sort of superimpose new shadow governments on the different levels. And I think governments are not ready for that, but on the city level, we might be able to start experimenting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dennis, for a very powerful answer and yet given it in time almost. So thanks for that. We quickly move to Mayor Cholando Chitangala. So Lord Mayor, what do you consider to be the city's role in fostering community-led innovation?
Thank you very much. I think it's very important that we have a community-led approach. Listening to my other colleagues was quite interesting because I just, different problems with similar solutions. But for us, I think it's very important to do a lot of sensitization. And from what I learned, like from my other colleagues, it's we need to have proper data of what is on the ground. But like I said, what is lacking for us is that we don't have like early warning for all these problems, like when we are going to have floods and so on. We may have it at national level, but at local level, we lack that. But I think it's important that we also use our our colleagues down there, like for example, what I mentioned, the junior council and just the people working in the communities, so that we learn from each other and then we collect as much data as possible that we can use to give it to our partners or just the stakeholders that are there to help us sort out this climate change crisis. Obviously, communicating with our people and really getting to understand that they also understand, take part in the solution is very important for us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for this very meaningful and inspiring answer. Just moving to our next city leader, Attorney Lord Mayor Attorney Rakib. Just in 30 seconds and linked to the question and answer that we had with the previous Lord Mayor. Like, how can local governments, in your perspective, can create enabling conditions for community-led innovation in climate action? In other sense, like how local governments and municipalities can enable their citizens to innovate in response to climate emergency.
All right. Thank you very much again. We are focusing on both creating the knowledge and the capacity of key departments, local organization, and most importantly, our citizens. First, knowledge at the local scale implies a thorough understanding of local complexities and priorities and how resources can best be leveraged to address these. At a global scale, knowledge refers to being aware of the dynamic trend that exists and participating actively in conversation and knowledge creation opportunities. Together, we can better understand serious problems and develop proactive local and international measures to address them. There are a number of actions can take in local government to provide an environment where proactive innovation can take place, ensuring our governance structures, including learning loops, breaking down silos between the governmental departments, and evidence-based adaptation to change. We must be flexible in our approaches to accommodate evolving challenges, as well as involve citizens in decision-making and science by using technology as a local for inclusion. To achieve this means building local capacity to engage with complex issues and with emerging the technologies that hold the potential to help to address them. In essence, we need to both forecast what might happen and develop preemptive structures to meet future challenges, but also to understand and act on the future as it emerges into the present. And this process should involve a diverse set of stakeholders. One way that we are aiming to achieve this is through close alignment and cross-sectoral collaboration between local government, business, and universities. I think there is no questions there can be. It's just a case how. Whatever policies and program we are developing, we ensure to take inputs from the local citizen and community, not at inception, but also throughout the different phases of project implementation. Citizen involvement is very crucial for us. We have used various mechanisms and tools, for instances, citizen survey and local media channel to involve and communicate our program and development activities. I think the main challenge will be to shift from the current focus on sectors and structures to a focus on human needs. This is something that is embedded our city. Although there are challenges involved, I feel the opportunities will be increased, collaboration at all levels, and change to make big changes in the way we do think, transitioning to more sustainable systems and implementing new solutions.
This was fantastic. Thanks so much, Lord Mayor. I guess like it was fantastic, inspiring, and a very concrete answer. And I'm sure like colleagues and experts beyond those who are in the room will definitely benefit from this message. Moving quickly to Arina, because I'm going to come back to Marcus and Miro and then Samba for their closing remarks rather than a question. But Arina, I mean, of course, we can listen to you for hours, but like in 30 seconds, how do we ensure that the process and outcomes of a co-creative process that you mentioned will lead to a broader, longer term transformation?
Fantastic question. Thank you for that. Actually, I think the quick answer would be by looking at the stuff that actually surrounds the outcome. So by that, I mean, first of all, making sure that the people who are actually at the table are not the usual people who always contribute with that one singular, kind of pathway that we see. So becoming aware of that single kind of discourse and deliberately bringing on board people who are outside of that discourse and in a way that is actually balanced so that they don't seem like, the odd voice that just screams on the side like the squeaky wheel, but their actually contribution is considered as valid and relevant. And the second one is actually looking at designing the entire thing from the onset with a long-term plan or vision, so that these actors actually collaborate, not just in a workshop that takes 3 hours or 3 days, but actually it might be a year-long or 3-year-long or 10-year-long process of working together that also ask us to question our assumptions, restructure the organizations and processes around producing that outcome, because that's how we actually transform the systems that produce the very outcomes. And so the outcome will reflect that transformation and our updated thinking, I guess. Any change starts in our heads. Our thinking influences how we act. So we need to address the thinking before we address the action.
I think that was very helpful to like something that is stick, it's like updated thinking. And this is literally what we need to move beyond, like in this mindset shift, to move beyond the existing systems. First, we need to start from how we think and what we are thinking. So moving quickly to Miro. Miro, we would like to hear your final remark, particularly around this notion of it starts with me attitude that you are referring to. So in 30 seconds, it would be appreciated if you could share your final remark on that front.
Yeah, so as I said, this is this new thinking that is needed, and this cultural revolution. And we hear very often about climate anxiety. Very many people feel helpless, weak. What might the future bring? And if we help people to take action, this is the strongest source for healing this anxiety. And then from this individual shift from passive being like looking at the snake of the climate catastrophe, but we start taking action in the right direction. It is the next step is community. And on the one hand, we can have, of course, digital communities, but it's very important to have real local communities. And here cities play a very central role, that there is this networking of those who really are willing to be the innovation leaders, the action leaders, the youth leaders in their community. So I would very strongly encourage the participating cities here to give spaces, organize events, bring people together. Then they will not feel so alone. And then it starts with me, it starts with us, will become reality. And this crisis is big, but it's also a big opportunity for leadership and for community, and even at certain point fun to take action together and being rewarded also in the right sense.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for this nice ending, and just being mindful of time. We'll move to Marcus. Marcus, you shared a lot of valuable and sort of provoking and provocative insights with the audience. It was really helpful. So I'm not going to direct what you're going to share as your final remark, and fully leave it to yourself. How would you like to frame it? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Look, time is the one word that I've inserted into that word cloud, and I think that's the crucial one that we need to spend more time on, both because it's another paradox. Time because we require to go much slower than what's currently going on, to be much more thoughtful and nuanced, but at the same time there's this urgency. we actually got to hurry, we got to accelerate. And so how do we overcome this conundrum of being thoughtful and deliberate at the same time of actually recognizing the urgency with what we are doing? What we are currently doing in response to that is trying to move the design approach away from just the individual hyper-local level. We're trying to find new ways, and that's kind of what's framed around this notion of institutioning, to also engage with entities that can give us a leveraging factor, that can give us a catalyzing factor, and that's still work in progress.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Is very interesting to hear that. And it was very interesting to understand that like time was coming from you. And thanks so much for elaborating on that. Indeed, that's a very, very crucial point to address that. And we would love to obviously continue this conversation with you to better understand that aspect. And last but certainly not least, Masamba, it would be lovely if you could kindly close this session with your final remark on the notion of expanded climate innovation agenda. The floor is yours.
Thank you. We have shared a lot of ideas that could help move forward with this expanded innovation agenda to solve the big challenge of climate and sustainability that we are facing. But at the center of this, the critical element that we need first to address is radical collaboration. All these things that we have shared will not be able to do it if we cannot put in place radical collaboration, and we are far from there. So radical collaboration is needed to develop and scale up the climate and sustainability solutions that we are contemplating. This will need to be integrated climate and sustainability solution. So innovation at the technology level will not be enough, as it was mentioned by Marcus. We will need to have integrated element where we will have innovative technology combined with innovative policy instrument, innovative financial instrument, innovative business model, innovative cooperative approach, and also innovative art. We need also to innovate on culture and creative industry, because it's also about changing behavior, and these things are important. And this collaboration needs to be across nations. This is very important. We need to work together to develop this needed climate and sustainability solution. This collaboration on the development of this climate and sustainability solution will help build trust. And what is really interesting here is that this is a virtuous circle. By working together on the development of this innovative solution, nations can build trust, and in building trust, they will be more keen to collaborate on developing a solution, which is a very interesting virtuous circle that can help achieve the vision of peace, security, and human dignity on which the UN is founded. But we need also to have collaboration within nations with multi-level climate and sustainability action, where central government, national government will collaborate with local government to plan and implement climate and sustainability action, but also where the private and the public sector will collaborate, and where also ministries, different ministries, will be collaborating in a horizontal coordination. Because very often what we are seeing is that we are facing challenge because even within countries, the Ministry of Environment is not completely aligned with the Ministry of Energy. The NDC is not talking to the strategy for the energy sector. And this kind of coordinated horizontal approach is extremely important. Finally, I would like to invite all of you to continue this very important dialogue during COP27, where the Global Innovation Hub of the UNFCCC Secretariat will continue this dialogue on expanded innovation agenda, with Mission Innovation, ICLE, and some other partners. So looking forward to continue this discussion at COP27. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Masao. We couldn't close this session any better than this. Really appreciate that. And unfortunately, we are out of time for this session, and we have to draw to a close here. I get the impression that we could speak about this topic for much longer. I think that this is a testament to the outstanding contributions from our speaker. So I would like to say a massive thank you to my favorite Dennis Famlin, Lord Mayor Chitangala, Lord Mayor Rakib, my colleague Masamba, and of course, Professor Marcus Vos, and last but not least, certainly Dr. Arina Nastasia, and the great Miro that has been really influential at the Daring Cities conversations. For sharing your knowledge with us today and basically bringing these critical issues and opportunities around an expanded climate innovation agenda to the fore. Thank you also to all of you in the audience for being so active in your engagement, standing with us almost 2 years. There were some really proactive questions rising, and this contributed a huge amount to this session. I'm looking very forward to building upon these conversations as we progress with this exciting week planned for Daring Cities. And yes, as Masamba mentioned, next stop, we'll look forward to continue this topic of climate innovation agenda at the UNFCCC Conference of All Parties in Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.